Welcome to Into the Desert, where we'll be having conversations about relevant issues with respect and without finger pointing. We're still new here, so if you'd like to join the conversation, please comment below. We'd love to read all of your comments and respond back, but make sure to do it respectfully. No demonization here. You watch things like the presidential debates, and through my life, the presidential debates have been exceedingly shrunk. Not necessarily like the duration of the debate, but in the format. And when they released this latest debate between Biden and Trump, they were given, a minute and a half to make their points? How can you address an issue in a minute and a half?
Well, part of this is cultural. One of the things that's happened over the last several decades, to say, is that we've moved to a Twitter culture. We want things short. We want things sweet. We don't want an elaborate analysis of a subject. If you go back to the Lincoln-Douglas debates, the format of the debates was that one candidate would speak for an hour, and then the other candidate would speak for an hour and a half, and then the first candidate would come back and they would have 30 minutes to do a rebuttal. The concept that we would sit down and listen to a speech for 30 minutes or an hour and a half is just kind of inconceivable today. People don't have that kind of time span. We've been trained by television since the 60s that everything gets resolved in the space of a television episode, interspaced with commercials oftentimes. So we don't actually look for long, elaborate answers, which is why we have when you're in a short time span, it's just much quicker to attack your opponent than it is to give a detailed response on some policy issue as to the ramifications and the reasons for it. So what else do you have left? You just throw some mud and hope it sticks.
Yeah, but if you even think about it, why can't we sit through even 15 minutes? So much more could be resolved if you give 5 to 15 minutes for someone to talk about an issue. But even in the past, when I've seen them having 5 to 15 minutes to talk about an issue, they don't talk about the issues. How do we get our politicians to know that we want to talk about the issues? We want to be able to express the difference between liberty and equality and all of the other things that are really important. How do we talk about the border crisis without talking about, I want to let people in because we are a country of immigrants and we have the Statue of Liberty that says, bring us your poor and your hungry. And yet we don't want people just crossing over our borders because they bring in a lot of terrorists and a lot of drug dealers and crime that's coming across the borders. How do we have a meaningful conversation about a topic as complicated as immigration in our borders if you get a minute?
Well, in that case, it really is kind of impossible. It's difficult to do you can't pack 5 minutes of information into, a minute or 30 seconds or 90 seconds. It's just not going to happen. And so when a politician is given those constraints, when anybody's given those constraints, you're not going to get anywhere. You can look, there are good, intelligent debates going on. In fact, one of the debates is called Intelligence Squared. Another is called the Monk Debates. And they are very serious debates by very skilled people. Most of them aren't actually politicians. Some of them are, but they will go into a subject. Now, they don't have the Lincoln-Douglas style, but they have they have like 5 minutes or something for opening arguments. In 5 minutes, you can begin to lay out a coherent message as to what you want or what your position actually is. And then they go back and forth. They have some questions, and then they have a summary statement at the end. And at which point the audience votes on who they thought would win the debate. And you can get a substantive discussion, but even those are somewhat limited down. I mean, we're not going to go from excuse me, we're not going to go from sound bites and bumper stickers to the Lincoln Douglas debates overnight. It's a process that we have to sort of teach ourselves how to do. I read a book called Ghost Soldiers about the first raid into the Philippines to rescue the POWs from the Bataan Death March. And they talked about, in that book, they talked about when the inmates had basically, they got their freedom and they could sleep on a bed the first night because they hadn't slept on a bed in so long. Virtually every one of them in the middle of the night got off the bed and got back down on the floor because it was too uncomfortable to sleep in a bed. They were used to sleeping on a hard floor. It took time to get back to be able to sleep in a bed. And we're kind of there. We gonna have to wean ourselves off the sound bites. And it's not gonna necessarily be easier because you know what? It's so much easier to sling mud than it is to give a coherent argument. Because if you sling mud, it normally gets your opponent dirty and you don't have to do much. And if you want to give out a coherent position, well, we've sort of punished our politicians and trained them to the point that they don't want to tell us anything bad. If they tell us something bad, then we won't vote for them. And so they try to sugarcoat everything and spin everything, and everything on their side is wonderful, and everything, on the other opponent's side is horrible. And basically, currently it's like whoever can swing the most mud wins. That's not a good way to run a democracy because we have lots of different issues. They all involve trade-offs. They all involve issues that are in conflict where you're not going to have a perfect solution. You're going to have a mixture of pain A versus pain B, and how much do you want to actually adjust those and play with them to get at least some sort of balance. So that's a virtually impossible thing to do when, in our current political environment where everything is so polarized, and we've gotten, you call somebody a name, they're very likely to call you a name back. And so that cycle's been going on for so long, it really doesn't even matter much who started it. The real question is who's going to be the first politician to stop it? And will we reward that politician, or will we actually punish them for not giving us the sugar-coated version?
Thank you for listening to Into the Desert, exploring the wilderness of thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe and put your comments below. Remember, be civil. We want to foster discussion and not division.